Yeah, somebody didn't clean out the vent on the dryer or something like that, and their laundry caught on fire. The whole flange is separated by a quarter inch or something. So you got 360-degree spray, and you're trying to yell at the guy on the other side of this wall of water, like, "Hey, tighten this bolt,"
Welcome to How I Embraced the Suck, a podcast where you get to hear from veterans what life in the military is really like. I am your host, Walt, and before we start, you should know that I do not censor the show in any way. You have been warned. So, yeah, let's get into it. Here we are with John, former Submariner. John, what's up?
Hey, how's it going, Walt?
Not bad. Thanks for coming, being part of this show here,
Definitely.
and looking forward to it. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your time in the military, in the Navy?
Yeah. All right. So I was just going to college. I didn't have really a solid plan, and so that was kind of my one of the driving forces for me joining the Navy. I knew I wanted to be military, since high school. I didn't really want to go to college, but anyway, so I was talking to my dad, and I was thinking about going down to the recruiters, and so he asked me, "Well, what are you thinking about doing?" And I said, "Oh, Army. I want to drive trucks. I want to, do something like that." And he's like, "No thought of the Navy at all," because he was prior Navy, and I was like, "No, not really." And he's like, "Well, let's go there first, because then you're not really interested. You just see what they have to offer." I was like, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea." So I walk
Smart dad.
to the Navy recruiter's office, and he waves a bunch of flashy brochures and a whole bunch of money in front of my face, and I was like, "Oh yeah, let me do that." And so I took some assessment tests and everything that they have before they give you a job offer, and then next thing you know, I'm signed up. Mom's not too happy, but that seems to be pretty standard.
With military or the Navy choice?
Military in general.
Yeah,
just
yeah.
Leaving home.
Yep.
First
My
one.
boy!
Yeah, of course. So I went off. It was about a 9-month wait between signing up, saying, "Yeah, I'm gonna join," and actually leaving. Depending on the job you go for, it could be a long wait.
Oh, okay.
So
Sure.
So I was attempting to be a nuke electrician, and so that school was backed up for a bit. So then the big day comes, and fly off to Great Lakes, which is the Navy's basic training command. Went through training there in the summer, and then went over to near Charleston in South Carolina is the nuke school. So it was a 6-month, what they call A school, which is your first school you go to get training. And I made it about 5 months in, and they're like, "No, you're not making it."
Oh, really?
Yeah. I failed out. It's a pretty brutal. They pack a lot of information in a short period of time, and so my poor study habits in college continued on, and so looking back, I'm extremely glad that happened. I really enjoyed the job that I had, which I went up to Connecticut and went to sub school there, and then went to their mechanic A school. That was much shorter, much more enjoyable, much more laid back. And then after going there, I got stationed out on the West Coast, which it was my preferred. It was literally the exact thing that I wanted, was getting stationed up in Washington State.
Sure.
Being from California, stay on the West Coast, close to family. So I was very thankful for that. And that was my duty station, was Bangor, Washington, and on the boat for 3 years. So I served a total of 4. I was on the boat for about 3 after all the training and stuff on the East Coast. And then, I got out after that and stuck around in Washington State. So that was kind of a overview, I guess, of just real quick points of interest, I guess.
Yeah. So, so you had a 4-year contract. If you'd gone nuke electrician, would that have been a longer?
Yeah,
I know often nuke is.
Right. So any of the nuke jobs, either mechanic, electrician, or an electronics guy, it's an extra 2 years on your contract. So initially I had a 6-year contract because those first 2 years are solely training. Like it's 2 years worth of training.
Oh, okay.
It's you got your A school and then another 6-month power school and then another 6-month prototype where you're like actually working on a mock-up of an actual running reactor.
Okay.
And then with the delays in between classes and everything else that goes on, it ends up being about 2 years from when you join to when you actually go out to sea. So,
gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So in that, okay. And then the rest of the next 4 years, you'd pretty much be deployed or out at sea or whatever.
Yeah. And so since I got out of that program before I got any incentives from the program, then they just basically canceled those 2 years, and it was as if I had joined initially on the other job. If I had made it through that A school, then I would have gotten a rank increase, and then if you make it through the next school, the power school, then you get X amount of money, and once you completely graduate, then you get the rest of your sign-on bonus for being a nuke
gotcha
guy.
Yeah, and finishing A school and getting the increased rank would have committed you to that 6 years.
Yeah, well,
gotcha.
Possibly not the entire 6 years, but at least a portion of the time.
Right.
And then depending on how much they paid you out, they would either want it back or again want time.
Interesting. So, okay.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, because they put whatever they put into you, they obviously want to get out.
Sure.
So
yeah.
Interesting. Okay. Let's see. What? I mean, obviously with subs, everybody knows subs, super secret, all that stuff. Can't talk about anything.
Yeah.
The speed is somewhere from 1 to 1,000 miles an hour, all that stuff. So what was your day to day when you're, I guess first when you're at port, and then second when you're out at sea, whatever you can.
Sure.
Like when you're at port, what are you? There's like 2 crews, right? You were on a boomer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. So I guess the difference with submarines, you've got the what they call the boomers, the ballistic missile boats. They're a lot larger, completely different mission than the fast attacks. And so you have 2 crews, and so one crew will go out to sea, and another crew's on land, catching up with training and whatnot, and then they come back, and you switch out, and vice versa. It's about 3 months on, 3 months off kind of a thing, but that schedule changes
based
practically
on
every day.
Yeah.
Either based on your boat or somebody else's boat that is good to go or broke down or they had a problem or whatever else. So,
or operation deployment schedule, all that stuff. Sure.
So when I got there, our crew was we had the boat. We were in charge of that refit period where the boat is in port, getting caught up on maintenance and whatever, getting ready to go back out to sea. So I got there, and immediately it's like get thrown headlong into trying to get qualifications and find your way around the boat, and the whole thing is torn up, and there's it's just kind of a little bit of mayhem for the first time. After that you're like, okay, I understand what's going on here. And then let's see, I think it was maybe a month or 2 after I got there, we were out to sea. And it was one of the longer patrols. I think it was 100 and something days or whatever. So a little bit longer than your standard, stereotypical 3 months. But
sure,
there's some that are, only 20 days or 15 days or whatever. It just depends on what they have in store for that. And while I was at the base, another boat set a record for the longest patrol because either another boat broke down or whatever, and they just had to stay out.
Sure.
For I think it was like 140 or 150 something days, which is insane. Can't imagine. But But
Wow.
yeah, so in port, priority is getting maintenance done. So the division I was in, we were auxiliary division. We owned all the hydraulics, the compressed air, the sanitary systems, the emergency diesel, the freshwater, seawater, pretty much any system that had a pump or a valve. Well, atmosphere control, that's another one. A lot of pretty much, like I say, any system that had a pump or a valve or something, we had our hands in it. So our refits were pretty maintenance intensive, just getting everything caught up and ready to go, trying to fix any problems that we had. It was typical to get on the boat around 7:15, 7:30 in the morning, and not get off till 10 at night or so.
Oh, wow.
And then depending on if the other crew was helping out with duty section, whatever, you'd stand watch either one every 3 days, or every third day, or every fourth day. There was one time where we got every fifth day, and we thought that was just amazing. But for that day that you're on duty, you're on the boat for 24 hours.
Sure. Okay.
And being auxiliary division, you usually don't get very much sleep. So everybody else goes home and like, all right, you got all the rest of this stuff to finish up before we come back tomorrow morning. So
yeah, I've had friends in the sub service, and they would often comment how each crew, any maintenance that could be delayed until the next crew deals with it was pushed off, and they only dealt with the urgent stuff.
Yes, that happened on both sides.
If you got to give.
Sure. Yep.
Huh. Yeah, maybe tyranny of the urgent, I guess, right there.
Yeah. So usually by the end of that in-port period, at least for me, I was like, can't we just go out to sea already? Like I'm done with commuting back and forth and talking to wishing I could plan stuff with friends, but oh no, we're working this weekend, or I'm not going to get off till midnight, so no, I can't come over and do whatever. And then once you're out to sea, you can just kind of relax and you fall into a much more scheduled routine. So
sure. Well, and you got like everything's a direct purpose.
Right.
When you're at the port, I guess it feels like, well, shucks, what are we doing? Mm-hmm. But if you're literally lives are depending on you getting those valves or whatever maintained. Yeah. I guess.
Yeah, it was a little, like, honestly, a little bit relaxing, because you're like, you're out, you're not constantly going back and forth between the boat and the civilian world, for lack of a better term. You're just on the boat.
Good point.
You don't really care about your finances. Well, at least for me, being single at the time, I didn't really have a care in the world. So, not worrying about your truck breaking down on the way into work, or whatever else there was going on at the time. So.
Right. Huh. Well, driving Fords, you probably had to worry about that quite a bit.
Yeah. So to, I guess, transition into at sea, the first patrol I was on, we were on a rotating 18-hour days. So it was broken up into 3 sections. You'd be on watch for 6 hours. Then you had 6 hours of your off watch time, which you do maintenance or whatever else, and then 6 hours where you'd sleep or work out or something else. So a lot of times the lines got blurred between those. If you didn't have a whole lot of maintenance, well, then you could go watch a movie or work out or work on the next qualification or sleep or whatever. And then somebody did a bunch of studies on how detrimental that was to circadian rhythms and whatever else with sleep cycles. And so they shifted to a 24-hour day with 8-hour sections. And so you'd have 8 hours of watch and 8 hours of off watch and 8 hours of personal time or something.
Okay.
And at first there was a lot of pushback to that. Like, everybody's like, oh, this is how we've always done it.
Right.
But once you got into it, man, having those 16 hours of off watch, if you didn't have anything to do, was amazing.
I bet.
One of the times we were going out, I had duty the night before, and I was on the morning watch. So I was up at 3 in the morning or something to stand watch in port. Then we broke loose from the pier and started going out, and I was the maneuvering watch guy. And then it just so happened that during that time of the day, once we transitioned to at sea watch, I was on watch for at sea. So almost my whole log from like 3 a.m. till almost midnight was all my handwriting filling out logs. And as soon as I was off, I hit the rack and didn't wake up until the guy was like, "Hey, it's your turn again."
Oh, man.
So it was like 16 hours straight. I was out.
Wow.
But
so
yeah.
just because the nature of what the boat was doing changed, the watch schedule was totally disconnected from one aspect to another.
Right. So you'd have your import watch assignments, and then in the transition while you're on the surface transiting out from Bangor out to the open ocean was the maneuvering watch. And so everybody's up, everybody's got a job to be doing. You know, if nothing else, they're sitting in a corner watching a valve, making sure it doesn't leak. You know, everybody's got a place that they're assigned to be. And then once you finally submerge and you're out, then you transition to your normal at sea watch bill. And so it's, whoever makes it up decides, okay, section 1 is, day shift, and section 2 is swings, and section 3 is graves, or however it breaks it up to be. So
sure.
And then every 2 weeks you rotate. It might have been every week. No, I think it was every 2 weeks you would rotate. And so that Saturday they would do some sort of a split watch where one section would be on for 4 hours and then another section would be on for 4. And they'd work it so that it wasn't too bad. Like usually one section got a little bit of a rough deal, but the other two kind of got a hookup. And then, the next time they switched, it was another section's turn. And so you would rotate through. So one section didn't get the day shift for the entire patrol or something like that. So usually worked out pretty well.
So when you were at sea, was your maintenance schedule as heavy as it was? It sounds like it was less heavy than when you were at port.
Yeah, it usually wasn't as bad. And then depending on what kind of inspection we would have while we were out to sea would usually drive how heavy the maintenance schedule was, or how much, the chiefs or the, whatever would be getting down on you to clean up your areas or something, make sure everything was squared away. So.
Okay. How, like if you're maintenance, spare parts, what did you carry? I mean, obviously you didn't carry a new hull.
No.
But how much did you carry?
Honestly, I was quite surprised, some of the items that we carried and the storage space that we had. There's a lot of stuff that I just was completely unaware of until it's like, hey, we need this part, or we need to figure out what to do. And we'd go ask the supply guys, and they'd be like, oh, yeah, it's in this locker over here. And they go squirrel around somewhere and dig a part out. And was like, wow, I wonder how long that's been sitting there. So there's pretty much any spare...
Hyman Rickover himself touched this part.
Yeah. So pretty much any spare place, there was some sort of a locker or something. And every once in a while you'd find one that was empty, and if you could get your lock on it, then maybe you had a little extra space to stash some snacks or energy drinks or something. But a lot of them were taken up by extra parts. And so we had a whole cabinet full of just O-rings, because anytime we take something apart, we're going to replace the O-rings in it, make sure it seals up good. And so lots of O-rings, but then a surprising amount of spare parts for other things. And quite some items a lot more expensive. You're like, hey, this failed. Yeah, that's $30,000 for that valve. Oh, really? Well, can I get one? So
wow.
Yeah, hats off to the supply guys for keeping track of all that kind of stuff. So
yeah, no kidding.
Yeah.
Huh, that'd be crazy. So speaking of your watch schedule and everything, how did you, if you had no sun, I don't know, this is probably a common question, but how did that affect you? How did you deal with that?
Yeah. The doc on board, he would, every time we go out, he'd, give a little talk. And he had a little list of things that he'd either he carried a lot of extras of because he knows that not everybody's going to do exactly what he says and bring all the supplements and whatever. But it was definitely like you're supposed to have, like a multivitamin and vitamin D. Those were like two of the big things to keep on hand and keep up with, so you didn't, mess yourself up. And the guys that I was with in my division, like it was fairly labor intensive. So a lot of the guys in their spare time, we'd work out. So we had a lot of extra supplements and protein and, whatever else on board.
Yeah.
And that was kind of one of our, some of the other guys, they'd sit in the lounge and watch movies all the time, and we'd go hit the weights and stuff like that. So, but definitely you'd come back, a little paler than everyone else, especially if you came back in the middle of summer, you're like, this is weird. So that was the worst, to have a summer patrol, because then you'd leave, late spring just when the sun's coming out, and and then you come back in fall and the clouds are rolling back in, and you're like, oh no, I missed out.
Oh, no kidding. Huh. That sparked a thought, but I don't remember what it was. So, yeah, like everybody's seen the military, the sub movies and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like what would you say in a lot of movies is accurate to the reality of like just your day to day, and what's like not so accurate? Like not obviously not some comedy movie or something that's obviously not accurate, but like what's a common thought that is like way not accurate?
Some of it is just little things like, there's a really, tense moment between, big actors in the movie, and, they're going from point A to point B on the submarine, and it's like, thematic music, and they're going down this hall and through a watertight door and up, some stairs, and, et cetera, et cetera. It's like this long played out thing. And me, as someone that's intricately familiar with the layout of a submarine, I'm like, those two spaces are like, a 5-second walk away from each other,
by design probably, to avoid that
it's like, okay, they're in this one place and they're going to this other place. It's like you walk out the door, down a very short hallway, up the staircase, and there you are.
Right.
So something as small as that, it's easy for me to pick up on and be like, okay, that was a little, played up for dramatic effect.
Right.
Some of the other stuff, a lot of times they'll have, scenes where they're running drills and stuff like that, which is very accurate. We run drills all the time.
Oh, sure.
Pretty much every day, we're running some sort of a drill. I guess some of the other things where people are making decisions in the midst of like actual casualties, I guess just knowing the procedures that are in place and the actions that would normally be taking. Some of that kind of stuff, just like operations wise, can be inaccurate. And then like mostly, obviously computer generated imaging of a sub going through a water.
Right.
And they're taking a turn and they're banking in as if they're doing the,
like an airplane
Indianapolis
or
500 or something, just like banking around this corner, or, shooting through a super tight space or something like that, underwater tunnel or something. It's like, okay,
Yeah. Huh.
But it makes for a good movie. So.
Yeah. Yeah. The whole, anytime there's a fire drill on a sub in a movie, I shut it off.
Yeah.
I'm done. That's not my type of movie. Just two things I don't care for: underwater and fire. Just like, why would you? That's always been like my number one reason for being like, okay, a submariner, all right, that's a tough guy. It's like, you literally die. There's so many ways to die down there.
Yeah. So it's like, we're running drills, and it's kind of down to the second as far as, the guys that are on watch are supposed to respond first, because, they're going to be the ones up and about in the spaces. And then, so X amount of seconds from someone discovering it, it's supposed to be, announced and people on scene and taking care of it. And then the guys in the racks, are supposed to be up and dressed, and, the backup force within, another time
Oh,
metric.
sure,
So
sure.
if those aren't met, then the chief of the boat gets really angry and yells at everybody.
Right.
And you do it again.
Yay!
Usually
what fun.
right as you're going back to sleep.
So that. So you would run those drills like the people on watch, just stay on watch, right?
Oh yeah.
And then, so the drills is like the people that are on maintenance would be running the drill, and then the people sleeping would be the backup.
Yeah.
So it disrupts
typically.
everybody.
Oh yeah.
Okay. It's my impression is it's such a tight space. Like everybody knows what's going on. It seems like, is that true, or
For the most
to a certain
part, yeah.
extent? I mean,
Yeah. Like only the navigation guys and the officers and stuff like that are going to know like where you actually are. Like that's pretty high up on
Sure.
the classification scale.
but like what's going on in the boat? Like,
Yeah.
if whatever drama is going on, it's kind of the big scuttlebutt of the ship, I would assume.
Sure. Yeah. Definitely being like, honestly, our divisional space is almost in the middle of the boat. And we've got guys on watch that go all the way to the back and all the way to the front. So we're kind of roaming around all the time.
Sure.
And, we might not be the most up to date, but typically we have an idea of what's going on. If nothing else, from a equipment perspective, if something's going on back in the engine room, it's going to travel pretty quick. If nothing else, they're going to tell the engine room room's going to tell control. Other than that, they'd tell the guy on watch in our main space, and then he'd tell the guy up forward, and the guy up forward would run up and tell the guys in control. So there's many methods of communication flow throughout, and usually we kind of have a hand in it. So,
I remembered my question that I was thinking, what it sparked.
oh yes,
Wasn't really related to anything that you were talking about, but it sparked an idea. And so like in like not Secret Service, Special Forces, you often hear a lot about how rank is kind of blurred.
Oh yeah.
There's just a much more mutual respect, and from what I've heard, subservice is kind of like that. Like you're all tough enough to bury yourself underwater for 3 months. There's like that mutual respect. Is that true, or is that like my false impression?
Oh no, absolutely.
Maybe to a certain extent.
No, yeah, to a certain extent, but also quite accurate. Like from my civilian job and being in contact, limited contact, but if nothing else, observing surface sailors and just knowing a little bit about how like aircraft carriers and stuff like that work. A lot of times rank is very segregated, whereas on the submarine, you'd bump shoulders with the captain, on almost a daily basis, depending on what you were doing.
Probably literally.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. You're walking down the hall. Oh, good morning, sir. And you kind of turn sideways and scuttle past each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. All the guys in the division from, E1, E3, whatever they are, the lowest enlisted up to the first class, division, petty officers, we're all eating at the same tables. The chiefs have their own table, but it's right next to the one that you eat at. So, everybody on the enlisted side is all eating in the same space.
Chief is like E7, isn't it? Or something like
Yeah.
that? Okay.
Seven,
definitely an
8,
exalted
and 9
class.
would be your chief, senior chief, master chief, and they have their own quarters and stuff like that. But you still, and then the officers have their own spaces. But again, everybody's on the boat. It's a limited space.
Right.
You're going to be interacting with everybody from the lowest to the highest rank on almost a daily basis. And yeah, it's I guess a unique thing in the service, if nothing else in the Navy, because like on a carrier, if you're an E5, you're an E6. Oh, you're E7, man. It's just completely, at least from my perspective of how things work.
Right.
I've never been on a carrier, so I can't speak to it on a personal level, but from what I've observed, it's quite different.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, the physical closeness, I guess, if nothing else, would contribute to that.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're
Yeah, you're all sleeping in the same, your chief's up forward in the chief's mess and whatever in the chief's quarters, but all the rest of the guys, you're all sleeping in the same bunk rooms,
Yeah,
So,
you deal with the same stuff every day.
Yeah.
With each other. It's just if you don't get along, you're gonna know it real quick.
Oh yeah.
Huh. Interesting. So kind of related. We have a mutual friend who I knew at the time. For the listener, he was long story short, got drunk, which he was maybe known for, and wrecked his car. I just heard about it through mutual friends. I was like, oh shoot, I think he got like NJP'd or whatever. That's all I knew about it. So he was on the same boomer as you. What was your experience? I mean, you found out about it. So tell us about your experience, your side of that story.
Yeah. So from my side, I guess we came into work and it's like a little, something's going on, and you're just trying to figure out what the deal is. Like, what happened? Why is the atmosphere different, if nothing else? And then it's like, oh, so and so got a DUI. He got, he wrecked his car, whatever. The cops got him, all this stuff. Like, chief had to go pick him up from, whatever happened.
Right.
And, oh man, who was that? Who was that? Oh, I don't know. Everybody's like trying to piece the story together, kind of a thing. And
just a lot of gossip.
Sure. Oh yeah. And you think, oh, what a scumbag, who was that? Hopefully it's the guy that nobody likes, kind of a thing.
Right.
And then finally, obviously it comes to light. Everybody knows, oh, captain's mast, everybody's got to go to it and, see what's going on. And so there's, I guess for the listener, there's two types of captain's mast where it's essentially a court and the captain's the judge. And there's a closed type and an open type. The closed type obviously is behind closed doors. All interested parties are there, but that's about it.
Okay.
And but then the open type, it's like the whole boat shows up. And so everybody's there standing in formation, and
a lesson must be taught.
Yeah, kind of a thing. Sometimes the accused, I guess, if they opt for an open mast, can sometimes get lesser. It's almost like a plea deal.
Oh, sure.
Where it's like, hey, I'll go in front of the crew and own up to it and let this be like a learning point for everybody, and maybe I won't get quite as hard of a punishment. So there's that. But yeah, so he, it was open mast and everybody came up and, I forget what exactly it is. Typical captain's mast, it's like half month's pay for 2 months and you're restricted to the boat for 90 days or something like that.
Oh, okay.
Or 60 days or 30 days or whatever it is. And so basically you have to, you get to go home and pack a bag essentially, and then you're on the boat for that time. And it's basically like you're on duty the entire time.
Okay.
You have a set schedule and you're up, when the duty section's up, and you don't go to bed until late.
Right.
And you've got, all the menial jobs.
Oh man.
So, from what I understand, it's not the most pleasant experience.
Yeah.
Especially since you're only getting half of your paycheck at the same time.
Oh man.
That was a pretty typical, punishment was, if nothing else, half month's pay for 2 months and some sort of restriction.
Yeah.
And then after that, another one is reduction in rank. So that could get thrown into the mix as well.
Sure.
So you're stuck on the boat, you're only getting half your pay, and it's half of a lesser pay than you're used to. And then, life goes on. You're just a rank below and have to, try and get back up, I guess.
Right. And then that's on your record. And
yeah.
Every time a promotion comes up, they're like, well, this other guy looks a little better than you.
So, I guess my perspective of that is I always thought, oh man, those guys are, I guess it would be similar to perspective of people's thoughts of, guys that get sent to prison. Like, oh, what did they do? They must be a horrible person. And then it happens to one of the guys in your division. You're like, wait a minute, he's my buddy. You're up sticking up for him, and it kind of, once that happens, it like throws a different outlook on it. And you're like, it's almost like, I don't know, instead of picking on the person, you're like, oh, it's the captain, he's just trigger happy on sending people to captain's mass, you're an all right guy, don't let him get you down, kind of thing. It's like fighting the man.
Right.
So, it's definitely a different perspective when it happens to one of your own.
Hang on. We had a problem.
And we're back. Let's just say that they don't make batteries like they used to. Yeah. Let's see, where were we? We were talking about punishment, captain's mast,
right,
etc.
Yeah, so, I guess just the differences between seeing it happen to somebody else that you weren't like super close with versus having it happen to somebody, in your division, which did happen. We had a guy that went to captain's mast again for an alcohol-related incident.
No, in the Navy?
Yeah, right? Drunken sailor? Couldn't be.
They should write a song about that.
But yeah, so that was definitely kind of hit home and was kind of a bummer in the division and whatnot. But I guess kind of a sort of related topic to that is just something that I kind of took with me from the military, is at least from the sub community, is just how tight knit everybody is.
Sure.
Because, if nothing else from that experience, being like, oh man, this guy's essentially family, he's part of the division. He's, one of the guys. And it's not something that I've really found elsewhere, just having the guys that you work with, essentially be, your family. You spend a lot of time with them. When you're out to sea, every moment you're with them. You're sleeping, you're eating, you're joking around, you're, whatever pastimes you have, in the limited space. And so you really get to know people on, I guess, a different level than you would elsewhere. And that's definitely one of the things I miss about it. You're even at work, you work with some guys, and then, some guys come, some guys go, you get put on a different, assigned to a different crew or something. And it's like, no big deal. If somebody's not there, oh, they must have called out, oh, whatever. Whereas when I was on the boat, it's like, if somebody wasn't there, you went looking for him. It's like, where's this guy?
Where's your commitment?
Yeah. You didn't have the option of calling out unless you were like actually sick and had to go to the hospital or something. Right. And, so it was definitely just a different dynamic. And, I still have guys that I, if nothing else, try and keep in contact with on a, semi-recent, basis. And, a guy that I had, got out, moved out of state, haven't seen him in, 4 or 5 years now. A couple months ago, got an invite to his wedding.
Oh, sure.
So stuff like that is just kind of unique, I guess, especially to the sub community. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I was kind of curious how, when you're in that situation, you're super tight, you have no option. Obviously, you embrace it. But, like, when you're out, did that friendship, obviously it didn't extend to everybody.
Right.
But
absolutely.
Some of them did continue.
Yeah, there were some guys in the division where it's like you didn't really get along with them, but, you're rubbing shoulders, so, you kind of made it do. And then once you're out, it's like, kind of good riddance,
Goodbye.
If I don't see you again, it'd be too soon.
Yeah.
So, there's one or two of those, but I would say for the most part, you'd leave on good terms with most of the people.
Sure.
If nothing else, a good acquaintance that if you saw in the grocery store, you'd give a head nod to or something, if nothing else. And so, yeah.
So, Speaking of weightlifting, what steroids could you get by with?
Yeah, there was they definitely
Some juicing going on.
yeah. Since you asked, yes, they do drug testing on a fairly frequent basis in the military.
Oh, I'm sure.
And it's not like the civilian sector where it's like, oh, you got 2 months notice, we're going to give you a drug test, down the road.
Right.
I know there's definitely some, if you're like a truck driver, forklift operator, or something like that, and there's a problem, typically that's part of the process is to get a drug test. But most of, I guess, other jobs, it's a protected thing. And but yeah, there was one time it was a miserable day. I think it was at when I was in sub school. They did a command sweep, is what they call it, where it's like, all right, good morning, everybody's getting a drug test today. And so you all get herded into whatever the biggest building was, and no one leaves until everybody pees in a cup.
Oh man.
And so if you really had to go and you were number 100 in the line,
oh, man.
Too bad for you. You could go, but then if it wasn't an official, then you had better start drinking water, So those were never fun.
Oh man. Did they get anybody, or was it if they did, was it announced?
Yeah, they not necessarily announced.
Depending, maybe if it was in your division or something. Okay.
Yeah, but they for whatever reason they suspected that somebody had a little, drug ring going on or something, and so they're like, all right,
sure,
everybody,
sure,
kind of a last minute, because they do randoms, every day or every week or something.
Okay.
Somebody would do a random number generator. I don't know how they picked it, but you'd walk in and you'd check the list and see if your name was on it, and if it was, then by 10 o'clock or whatever, you had to do that.
Okay, sure.
But aside from that, unless you saw your name on the list, it was like whatever. So I think that was the only time that I was part of one of those command sweeps. It's quite a miserable process, I imagine, for everybody involved.
No kidding.
So.
Yeah, so you had a lot of experiences, or as you're saying, that other people haven't had. What would you say kind of impacted you the most, like long term? Now that you're out, you're in a different culture, civilian culture, largely. What actual experience sticks with you the most?
I think kind of part of what I already said, like just the camaraderie of a group of guys that you live and work and eat and play and all in the same space, and
sure,
you go out to sea and go into the water for quite some time.
Yeah.
So
and then when you're in town, if you're out with the boys and someone picks a fight with one of your buddies, well, you're all in.
No kidding. Yeah. Yeah.
Right or wrong, he's my buddy.
And yeah. So I guess that would be one thing that's unique to the ballistic missile submarine community, is that people think of the Navy. Oh, join the Navy, see the world. Go to all these places and see all these sites.
Oh,
and whatever.
sure.
Where if you're on one of those boats, you leave from the port and you go into the water, and maybe if you're lucky, you can poke your head in control and see the surface on a display screen if you're up at periscope depth or something. But
right.
Other than that,
your job is to not see the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
You're pulling back in. There was one time that we stopped in Hawaii for like 3 days or something like that, because of whatever happened that patrol. We had to make a pit stop. But other than that, most of the time you go out, you do your thing, and you come back. So
bummer.
Yeah. It wasn't too bad. Like I did enjoy it. I really did enjoy the job. Just I guess at the time when I was making the decision to stay in or get out, I was looking at, other things civilian wise, trying to, if nothing else, make relationships with the people, that I met outside of the Navy. And it was difficult to do that if it's like oh yeah, I'm gonna be in port for the next 3 months. Oh, just kidding, somebody else's boat broke and we got to leave next week.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So stuff like that where you can't really make plans, unless you're told that you can make a plan, was, I guess, one of the driving reasons for me parting ways after my time was up. But I did love the job. I enjoyed the work. The guys were great. The chief that I had at the time when I got out, I still hit him up on a semi-frequent basis, and he was a great guy, good mentor and whatnot. So there's definitely times where I second guessed that. I've second guessed that decision. I can't tell you how many times,
right, for sure,
to stay in or get out. But that's where I was at the time. So,
oh shoot, I did it again. Should have written it down. I trust it will come back to me.
Yeah.
Let's see. You mentioned earlier to me before we started recording about sometimes you were a backup driver of the boat.
Yeah.
So, A, I'm interested in that. And then also B, was there a lot of cross training going on just because of the slim or the small complement on the boat? I assume that's the case. Talk about that a little bit. But also backup driver, like what's that?
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So when I would first get to the boat, it's different depending on what division you're in. If you're in navigation or sonar, or if you're a cook or supply guy or a nuke, your qualification path is different. But for me, you start on your qualifications in port because that's usually when you get there, and so you're trying to be a useful person. It was kind of, at the time, they were trying to get, I guess, a little more politically correct and weed out the hazing and that kind of.
What's the fun in that
part? Yeah, that kind of part from the culture. But everybody jokes about the nubs when you first get to the boat, the non-useful bodies.
Oh, yeah.
Other less pleasant terms thrown in there. But yeah, so you try to get qualified as quick as you could to contribute to the boat. So part of that was learning how to drive, and so there's two guys that essentially drive the boat. Obviously they're told what to do and where to go and
right.
whatnot, but they're the ones looking at the instruments and inputting the controls to make the boat go where it's
sure.
meant to go. So, yeah, so it was when you're not doing anything and you're just kind of, cruising around, trying not to be found, it's, you try and stay awake. But at other times it's quite the rush trying to make it go where, where the officers are telling you it to go.
Right.
Especially when they're, so under normal circumstances, maybe not quite as stressful, but then, an inspection team comes on board. So there's twice the amount of people in control, and they're all, at the rank of your captain or higher.
Right.
The chief of the boat's right on your shoulder. Like everybody's, in your face, like trying to make, you're like, I'm trying to hold this course. And so, but, pushing one of those big boats around underwater sometimes is a little cumbersome.
Never so insignificant, but yet significant.
Yes,
suddenly.
Absolutely. So, yeah. So it was. I enjoyed it. It would definitely be monotonous, but once I was eventually one of the guys that had a decent amount of experience, and so depending on what. Either drill or battle stations or something like that, and depending on who wrote the watch bill, I would have to give my log clipboard to somebody else and run up to control and take over driving the boat.
Sure.
So that was I guess a unique experience. And you say, I was driving the submarine. Like, oh man, that's pretty. But you're the lowest guy on the totem pole.
It was really boring.
Yeah.
Like, imagine the throttle cable in a car. That was me.
Yeah. Well, I essentially told the throttle cable what to do.
Yeah. So as far as cross training, was that common? Like, I imagine like everybody has to know how to fight a fire, something like that. But like as far as daily duties, is it common to be trained in something else?
So all the damage control stuff, that's kind of across the board. Everybody has to know that. That's part of like getting qualified in submarines. That's, it's kind of a big deal. Once you have those dolphins on your chest, people know they can trust their life to you, essentially. You're supposed to know how to, fix, flooding, fire, pretty much whatever gets thrown at you, you can fix it. So that's kind of something that you can rely on anybody, in theory, across the board, if they've got those on their chest. So that's definitely something that's the damage control side of things. As far as other cross training, it really depended on division. So I'd say probably about half the guys, half the boat or more, learned how to, drive. That was part of their initial qualifications, was standing that watch.
Okay.
Everybody has to be, essentially a waiter for the first, little bit. You wash the dishes and clean the tables and put the food out. The cooks are making the food, but you're the one, essentially being the waiter for everybody else, keeping up on that, getting rid of trash, the kind of menial jobs, I guess.
Right.
So usually everybody has to do a certain amount of time, doing a food service attendant kind of
You're
duties.
dumb and we don't trust you, so take out the garbage.
Right.
Yeah.
But once you get through that and you get qualified in submarines, then a lot of times it goes to more of your divisional duties. Say that like the supply guys or somebody like that. I guess their main qualifications would be either driving the boat or the guy that goes around and checks on like some of the information systems, making sure the ship's local internet is up and running and that the atmosphere control is reading what it's supposed to be, and some of the more, I guess, digital interfaces on the boat, making sure that those are all online.
Okay.
But aside from that, a lot of the other stuff is just divisional responsibilities.
Huh.
So.
Okay. I once again remembered the question.
Aha.
Or the thought, rather. When you were talking about being in port and whatnot, it reminded me, a lot of the public might not know this, but you have distance travel restrictions, correct? Like even when you're on leave, or if you're not on leave, but you're in port and it's your day off or your week off or whatever,
right?
You can only go a certain distance, correct? Without permission?
Right, yeah, there's...
like a circle or 100 miles or something?
Yeah, it's definitely a gray line, I guess you would say.
In my experience, it was almost a white line.
Right.
In my exposure.
Right. But yeah, in theory, you were supposed to be within, X radius of your home ports for, if the world started to end,
right.
You could get back to the boat in a certain amount of time.
Okay.
And usually there was scheduled leave periods. So you'd come back from sea, you'd turn over the boat, maybe help out with the other crew's refit a little bit. And then there is a scheduled time, a week or 2 weeks that it's like, okay, this is the time. If you want to take leave,
right,
you're going to take leave right now. Go visit your family, go do whatever you want to do. This is your time.
And this leave time was always right around Thanksgiving, of course.
Oh, absolutely.
Bang on.
Always landed on the perfect holidays and whenever you wanted to go. Yeah. And sometimes, if you had, a good excuse, you could schedule your leave for a different time period. But typically, once that was over, then you started training for the next deployment. You'd start writing up all the work packages. You would get message traffic from the boat while it was out saying, hey, we had this problem, we're going to anticipate having to do this maintenance when we get back.
Okay,
and so
sure.
you'd start researching and compiling diagrams and whatnot to get all the paperwork in order, so that when the boat gets back, you can be like, here, officer, here's all this paperwork, there's all the proof of what we want to do, and they look over it and sign off on it and be like, okay, go do this work. So you're just kind of prepping for when the boat gets back and making sure all your qualifications are
okay,
up to
sure,
date.
sure.
So doing more damage control stuff, that was you had a time metric on it. So you go do a firefighting trainer or a wet trainer, which is you're in this small room that's full of, pipes and other stuff that have predetermined deficiencies. And so you usually pick the new guy, hey, you go simulate standing watch in here, and whoever is running the trainer waits till he walks past the biggest, break in the pipe, and then he launches that. And so the
it's
guy
not
gets
hazing, it's
guy
training.
Gets soaked. Yeah. So then you all run in and you try and fix all these broken pipes while the water level's constantly rising in this room that you're in. So
yeah.
It's
I hadn't considered that aspect.
Yeah.
Like flooding.
Oh yeah, it's a enclosed room with a big window, and so whoever's running it is watching you and evaluating your performance, essentially.
Right.
And they'll pop off like 4 or 5 different leaks all at the same time, and from various sizes, from a little pinhole leak,
Sure.
maybe an 1/8-inch drill, punch through a pipe, to someone took an angle grinder to it, or a flange. The whole flange is separated by
yep.
a 1/4 inch or something. So you got 360-degree spray, and you're trying to yell at the guy on the other side of this wall of water, like, hey, tighten this bolt, So, and if the water gets too high, then they shut it off, and we're like, you sunk.
Right. Yeah. And you're like, oh boy.
So, yeah, it's quite the rush. You realize after the fact how much energy you expended. You're usually pretty wiped for the rest of the day.
No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah.
Huh. Do you feel like those simulations were pretty realistic? I mean, you come out of that, obviously no training is perfect.
Sure.
But did you feel like
I felt it was definitely they did a good job of, throwing a lot of curveball. You'd be working on something, and even if you've been through the trainer once or twice before, and you think, you remember where all the leaks were, they'll still, blindside you. There's, you're fixing one, and all of a sudden another one pops off, and it's just spraying you right in the face. And, you're wearing safety glasses and have earplugs in and all that, cause you got to be safe even while you're training. But yeah, so now you're like, okay, well, now what am I going to do?
Right.
Or you're fixing the one and the water level's coming up, and so you're sitting under this pipe and the water level's up to your chest or so, and your shoulders and head is above water, and you're trying to get this leak fixed before the water gets too high,
And then you drop your wrench in the water, and
yeah, that happens,
oh, man.
And there's definitely set points where they'll come over the intercom and be like, hey, get out of that spot, you're done fixing that leak, whether you were or not.
Sure.
Because you don't want something bad to happen, but you want everybody to get a good training experience and be like, hey, this is how it would really be, and worse.
Sure.
So,
sure.
We never had a flooding incident. We did have one fire, like a legit fire. There was a couple times where it was, hey, fire, and everybody would run over there, and it's like, okay, nothing really happened, which is how it's supposed to be.
Right.
But yeah, somebody didn't clean out the vent on the dryer or something like that, and their laundry caught on fire.
Ooh.
So
nice.
it wasn't huge, but you could definitely smell it, like, oh yeah, something was actually burning over here, that was a little bit of an eye opener, because, you run the drills and okay, everybody knows their place. But then once the real thing happens, now all of a sudden all the chiefs come in, the chief of the boat comes running in, the electrician chief comes running in because it's the dryer, so it's electric. A lot of things happen that maybe aren't exactly how it's supposed to be, in training. You're like, I'm supposed to be the guy shooting CO2 into this dryer, and everybody's in my way,
Right.
So.
And you might need to push a chief out of the way to get at it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that kind of tags into something that I remembered I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
when you were talking about, or when I asked about cross training, or just like everybody knows how to fight a fire, everybody is trained in certain things. It seems like there's a like just a level of personal responsibility, not not looking to somebody else to solve your problem. But if there's a fire, for example, if you're the guy with the CO2, you're not going to be looking to the chief when there's an active fire to be like, hey, excuse me, can I come through here? There's just this personal responsibility. This is my job.
Right.
I am in charge of this situation right now.
Yeah.
And just going through and dealing with it.
Right.
Was that A, is that correct? And B, did you see that like manifest in people's personal lives? Not just when they're, on the boat in the military, but did that seem to translate? Maybe that's a bad question, but
well, I think definitely it's true. Like once, even with drills, like I know there was one patrol in specific where our watch team was just we were trying to get the best time. Like there wasn't a competition, but we wanted to have the best times at beating the fires and whatnot. And there'd be small drills that they would run. They'd call them code reds. You wouldn't say the word fire because that if someone said fire, they'd be stop.
Right. Right.
That's not
that's the word.
Yeah. And so they'd call it a code red, and so everybody knew, okay, it's just the watch team. It's just training for the guys on watch to be that rapid response. No matter where you are, you're supposed to be able to get there in 30 seconds and have it, a hose, out and pressurized and ready to go, so sometimes we try and, I guess cheat a little bit and try and figure out like, okay, well, where's it going to be this time? And strategically place ourselves to be close by. But other times it's like you're down in a bilge checking a gauge somewhere and they're like, code red in this space. And it's like, that's on the other end of the boat. I better run.
And at that point, there's the movie scene where you're going through this door and this door and this door, whatever they call the doors.
Yeah.
Hatches, gangways,
some of our doors, there's some that are, watertight hatches, and those are a little more difficult to navigate, I guess. But
you're just getting there yesterday.
You chuck the clipboard and go running and holler at anybody that gets in your way. And so even in that situation, and that's where the watch team really comes together, I guess, where, okay, as this watchstander, you're supposed to be this guy if it's in the forward compartment or the middle compartment or the engine room. But depending on where you are, you might get there slightly after the guy that's supposed to be, a different. So say you're supposed to be the guy first on the scene with the extinguisher. Well, wherever you were, you're a few seconds behind, and the guy that was supposed to be on the hose gets there with the fire extinguisher. Well, he's going to grab the nearest extinguisher and jump in there, and you're going to be like, oh, someone that already has the extinguisher, I'm going to grab the hose. And so there's some of that where whoever was running the drill would be like, all right, you were supposed to be here, you were supposed to be there, but you killed it on the time, and you really adapted, and so overall good job,
so they would acknowledge,
oh yeah,
you didn't do technically correct, but you did the right thing.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good.
Because there was definitely times where people would be so focused and be like, I'm this watchstander, so I'm supposed to do this and only this. And it's like, well, if no one else is there, it doesn't do any good to stand by the hose ready to open the valve and pressurize the hose if no one even has a fire extinguisher on the fire yet.
Right.
So, yeah, there's a little bit of that. Most of the time, it was written pretty accurately, where, they had the time metrics down to where these people about where they would normally be would take them this long to get there. So this is the sequence that they're gonna form up and make a little team.
Okay, sure.
And then whoever, if it was a full scale drill and the whole boat's involved, then while everybody's doing that, all the guys that are sleeping are tumbling out of their racks and throwing their clothes on and running to wherever they're supposed to be to get like full firefighting gear on and go relieve the guys that are just in their regular clothes.
Right.
Doing that. So
I just sparked a thought. If you were driving, when a drill was going on, there was that much commotion. Could you feel it? Or is it not enough of a force?
It depended on where it was. So if it was like, say you're driving the boat and they ran something in the torpedo room, you would probably hear a little bit because it's, a few decks right underneath you.
Oh, okay.
If they're running something in the missile compartment of the engine room, you might hear somebody scuffling. I mean, the guys that are...
But you wouldn't feel it in the controls. It wasn't sufficient. Okay.
No. They say that you would do that. You would maybe feel it a little bit more if it was a fast boat because they were a little bit smaller. So if a whole bunch of people ran into the engine room, you might have to input your controls a little bit differently to counteract for all of a sudden, 1,000 pounds worth of, human flesh is going from the front of the boat to the back of the boat.
Right.
But on the boomers, not quite so much. But you were definitely, talking with your watch team as far as, the weight and balance of the boat, not related to people or anything, but just like, hey, I'm really having to constantly be pulling up on the controls to maintain depth.
Right.
What does that indicate? And you discuss it all. And there is quite an in-depth qualification process to be the guy that could interpret all of those, inputs, I guess.
Okay,
and
sure.
Look at what all the
the weight distribution and ballast and all that. Okay.
Yep. Yeah. So for a variety of reasons, you always wanted to be as close to an even keel, so to speak, as possible.
Sure.
So.
One question I like to ask is, obviously, when you were 18, you didn't listen to nobody. Speaking for myself, I was it. I knew it all. Had the glasses to prove it. If somebody came to you and said, "Hey, I'm a kid, 16 or 17 or 18, whatever. I'm interested in joining the military." What would be your advice to them? If they not like I want to join the Navy, but just like I want to join the military in general.
Right.
If someone's listening to this right now, what would be your advice to them?
I guess I would maybe have a conversation or something with them first, maybe something not too unlike what we're talking about just now, just kind of getting a feel for, their interests, what they, I guess, want to do in life and other things like that, and maybe share some of my experiences. And maybe go something along those lines. I guess I would maybe have a little bit of a caution, just if they hadn't thought of it before, that when you're in the military, like it's a whole, full lifestyle, like, commitment, I guess. It's not like you clock out at the end of the day and you go home and, you leave your job at your job and do whatever you want on your off time. A lot of times you go home, if you're in the barracks, hey, the guy you're working with, changing the O-ring on that valve is your, roommate or whatever else.
Right.
So it's a whole life, like you're fully involved in it. And, I guess for some parts of it, it's like you don't have a choice one way or the other. It's like, this is what's going to happen, either scheduling wise or, maybe even training wise. Like you're like, oh, I really like what I'm doing right now. I just want to do this. And it's like, well, too bad, you have to qualify, these other things. So there's a little bit of that where, like, maybe you just want to kind of relax for a little bit. Depending on what's going on, you might not have that option.
Sure.
And even down to other things, there might be something where you're like, oh, I don't feel like I need to do that. Well, if your boss said,
oh, shucks.
So that's, an interesting dynamic of it. It's not just your boss. Like, they kind of, in some ways, have a bit of control over, your entire life for a little bit.
Sure.
It's not just like, oh, you can boss me around at work, but you can't tell me what to do outside of work. Well, sometimes they can.
Right. Yeah. It's kind of in the nature of the service is it'd be hard to function in that capacity without that.
Yeah.
Authority structure.
Just speaking to, like, my own chief and some of the other chiefs, before I was getting out, and I was kind of having those discussions with them, like, staying in, getting out, kind of trying to pick their brain as far as their experience goes. A lot of times they're playing dad to a lot of people. There's you.
Oh, sure.
You go to boot camp, you go to your boat, whatever else, usually the first thing you ask, hey man, where are you from? Where'd you grow up? All this stuff like that. You got people from all over the country. You're sleeping next to a guy that, grew up, on the other, for me, I was on the West Coast. Well, there's a guy from Texas and a guy from, New York and a guy from, Illinois or something,
How
Minnesota, whatever. So, you got the whole gamut of people, it's quite interesting, just hearing everybody's got a different story, a different background, different experience of growing up and whatnot. And so for a lot of guys, they joined at, 18, just wanted to get out of the house, wanted to, do something different, get out of their small town or, escape the big city, whatever they wanted to do. And they don't have a whole lot of, they don't have any life experience. And so whoever their chief is kind of, they're playing dad to them. They're giving them financial advice. They're, in some cases telling them, hey dude, take a shower. Tomorrow, take a shower. The next day, take a shower. It's, like I say, everybody's got a different background, and some people didn't, have maybe as good of an upbringing as others. And so it's always a little bit awkward, but sometimes those conversations have to happen where it's like, hey man, this is how most people do basic hygiene. This is how you, fold your clothes. This is how you do a load of laundry,
Right.
Here's how you make a sandwich,
Have you heard of a hair comb?
Yeah. So stuff like that is definitely a unique thing to the military where, if you stay in and rise through the ranks, you're not just somebody's boss. You're a lot of times you're the first person they're going to get. They might not like you on, as a boss or something, but who else are they going to go to? Maybe they don't have, a good support system. And so,
Sure.
they're thinking about buying a car, thinking about moving out of the barracks, and maybe, as they go up in the ranks and they can, move out in town, stuff like that. A lot of times you talk it over with the other guys in the division and your chief and kind of get people's input and stuff like that. So,
yeah. I guess I should think about my question before I ask it. Did you have a lot of were you under a lot of different chiefs, or were you kind of under the same individuals the whole time?
Once I got to the boat, there were two different, there was the one that was there when I got there, and I think he left after the first patrol, or maybe,
okay,
it was shortly after I got there that he left, but he was there long enough that I didn't really like him, didn't really get along with him too well. I don't think anybody in the division really did. And there was a few just funny interactions with him. One of those expensive components that I talked about earlier.
Oh yeah.
We were messing with one of the atmosphere control equipment, for the whole watch. We were trying to get this thing to run right and couldn't figure it out and couldn't get it to run. And he was like, well, let me mess with it. And the guy that was on watch is like, hey, don't, I've been trying to do it this whole time. Don't mess with it. It's just leave it how it is. And he goes in, oh, I can do it. And then next thing you know, boom, clatter, 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 clatter. And then he's like kind of scratching his head, and everybody's like, yeah, we're going to eat.
Oh, man.
And turns out one of the compressors blew up, and it ended up being, I don't know, $26,000. We only had one spare on board or something like that.
Oh, man.
So that was just, an interesting, part of life that just,
right.
It's just stuff happens on the boat. But we were like, come on, really? Like, you're supposed to be the expert, and
right.
You went and blew it up. But then the next guy we got, he was the guy that, there was one or two people that didn't like him, but man, he was a really good chief. He was the guy that made me really think hard about staying in, because the other guy, I was like, man, I don't want to be here, longer than I have to. But then I got to know this other guy, and I was like, man, he's a really good chief. I learned a lot from him. A lot of financial advice, life advice, stuff like that.
I could be him.
Just talking with him, I was like, I really get along with this guy and really respect him, and like you say, maybe I could be him someday.
Yeah.
So
well, now you can be him in the civilian world.
Yeah. Right.
So I was that was a lead in to, you even really answered my question, but I was just going to ask about how your exposure to different leadership styles affected you. So you had those two direct leaders, chiefs, were they?
Yeah.
You said. So then what, like other leaders, other ranks involved in like the captain of the boat and all this stuff.
Right.
What, was the chief the biggest influence on your life, especially the second one?
Yeah, I would say so.
And then,
absolutely. There were a few others that you would get to know through interactions and whatnot. Like you say, you rub shoulders with everybody on the boat. And so just in seeing them, because if you're in your duty section, it might not be your chief that's the guy in charge of your duty section. So you could be working for your divisional chief during the day, but then if you're on duty, you're technically working for this other chief, because you're the duty guy. And so you definitely got to know the other leaders on the boat and whatnot. And there was a few, really the first chief that I met on the boat, really gave me a sour taste in my mouth for chiefs. And I had the opportunity to go out with another crew. They needed another auxiliaryman. And so I didn't have anything else going on, didn't have anything going on. And so I was like, yeah, I'll go. So I went out to help them out, and it helped me out too, because I got more qualifications and kind of was able to rise up that way. But just a side conversation I overheard, some guys really just bad mouthing this guy and being like, this guy's just a real piece, and the more I listened, I was like, I know who they're talking about. That's that chief. And I was like, hey, are you talking about so-and-so? They're like, yeah, you know him? I was like, yeah. And so it was like instant connection, oh, we both hate this guy so much.
Nothing like hatred to unite somebody.
So another example of how tight the sub community is, another submarine, and you know who this guy is and how much no one likes him. And so there's a few like that, but then there's also the few good ones that are really respectable people, and would help guys out and move them forward. So,
yeah. No, that's helpful to get that personal input to see, because like I say, civilians watch movies and think we know all about the military and know all the hip terms, and it's like, well, no, people actually do this every day. Mm-hmm. They're not putting out fires and shooting torpedoes. Like they get up in the morning, they eat breakfast, they work out, they stand watch, all this stuff.
Yeah.
It's just to get that personal viewpoint.
Yeah.
It is, I think that's helpful. Mm-hmm. That's kind of what I'm trying to do here. So,
right.
Let's see. Yeah. Do you have anything to plug or any message or anything specific to get out?
I guess just maybe recap on my experience on submarines.
Sure.
I really enjoyed it. I really did. I loved the job. The camaraderie, you're not going to find it anywhere else. And it was pretty unique. I definitely tend to have a more positive outlook on life than some people, so I know that helped me out. A lot of people really got bummed about the schedule or, whatever else they had to, work a 18-hour day or something like that. But I guess I'm more of a middle of the road kind of roll with the punches kind of a personality, and so I think that definitely helped me have a more bright outlook and on it. Even on my he said, well, what were some things you didn't like about the boat and some things you did like about the boat and like all this other stuff. And I was like,
you're like, can I be honest, or is there going to be repercussions?
I was like, honestly, I don't really have any complaints other than the schedule, and told him the stuff that I enjoyed, the positive interactions I had with, and the guys that I thought were really good and deserved, either a second look or a promotion or something, and he told me, he was like, well, I think, you would be great, if you stayed in, you would be one of the good ones, essentially.
Right.
And as I'm walking away, I'm thinking, well, I wish I would have talked to this guy, while I was making my decision, maybe I would have stayed in. But no, I guess just, like having that outlook, and enjoying where you're at, I guess a lot of people, for military and whatnot, you think, oh, fighting for your country, if you are a wartime vet, they think you're on the front lines and everything. And there's a lot that goes behind the scenes. And I think that being on the submarines really opened my eyes to that, is that there's a lot that goes behind the scenes in life. And you might see, take one, interaction at a face value. And then if you have an instant reaction to that, maybe it's something you might regret later on or something. But thinking about, I guess, what else goes on behind the scenes and stuff like that. I've had multiple interactions with people where it's like, oh, that wasn't a very positive interaction, but maybe they had a really rough day, or just I guess trying to give people the benefit of the doubt or something like that. And just enjoying having the freedom to make choices like that and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, I guess that would be my thing, is have a positive outlook on life and really think about how, I guess another thing is just interactions with people and how everybody's got a different background. So you might not agree with what somebody's saying, but that doesn't mean you can, just like shove your ideas or belittle them for their, I guess, background or something.
Yeah.
So, because there was some of that, a little bit of, I guess, bullying, for lack of a better term, but being able to appreciate a lot of different backgrounds and learning from people instead of shutting them down.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I appreciate that. That's a good, a good principle. It's easy to see the world through your own eyes.
Sure.
But to have that ability or the desire, the goal of kind of seeing a situation through someone else's eyes, that would definitely change. I mean, that changed your life, honestly.
Sure.
Right there.
And it's not like, I'm not a perfect example of that by any means. Many times I'll react to something or it'll be the next day and I'm like, wow, I could have, and you'll really rethink the situation that you were in from an alternate perspective.
Right. Yeah. Who hasn't regretted something they've done?
Absolutely.
But to have the mindset of trying to not, I think the effort is what's important.
Sure.
Huh. Yeah. Yeah. Well, cool. Well, yeah. Thanks for coming on and
absolutely
kind of sharing and your experience and opening your heart and all that and getting all vulnerable and everything and philosophical.
Hopefully people got a little glimpse and didn't ramble too much, and people got an idea of what the sub life was about.
Thank you for listening to this episode of How I Embraced the Suck. If you enjoyed the show, tell a friend. And as my Girl Scout den mother used to say, stay frosty.
Sometimes it's weird because I feel like I don't either I don't remember everything about a particular submarine movie, or I haven't seen every submarine movie out there, and so people would be like, oh yeah, like this movie or whatever. I'm like, yeah, I'm not sure what you're talking about.